there were two young men who had some kind of beef with each other. When one attempted to go outside, the other one shot him in the back of the head. I once worked with a family who the entire household was killed by gun violence. Her mother and her brother was shot and killed, and his mother was killed 2 days later in the same exact location. When I got to the scene, all that was there was a large amount of blood with a whole bunch of children's footprints from that barbershop all the way into the street. Pastor Donovan Price Sr.
What exactly do you do?
I'm a victim advocate here in the city of Chicago. So about 20 minutes after shots fired, I arrive at a scene. I work with the family, the people involved in the scene, the witnesses. I'm kind of a liaison between the police department, the detectives, and the families. Work with anybody else, the community there, both on the scene, and then afterwards I take them to the morgue for body identification and actually stand with them as they identify their loved ones. After that, I help them find resources and help with the memorial, help them find ways to do the funeral or the homegoing if they don't have that, and then if necessary, even perform the homegoing service. Okay? I once worked with a family who the entire household was killed by gun violence. It started with a 6-year-old, actually the first person I ever worked with, I believe, a 6-year-old who was shot, and she didn't die. I continued to work with her family, and then I would get a call every so often that says another relative in that household was shot. And finally, her mother and her brother, her older brother, who was only a couple of years older, was shot and killed, and his mother was killed 2 days later in the same exact location. And so it showed how terrible the epidemic of gun violence is. COVID was terrible, but gun violence definitely gives it a run for its money. And in that case, it wiped out a whole household, except the 6-year-old little girl.
The worst crime scene that you've been on?
Considering every crime scene is terrible simply because of its pure nature. However, there was a scene that I did at a barbershop, which just so happened to be my local barbershop, where when I got there, the scene was there were two young men who had some kind of beef with each other. One said to the other one, "Let's go outside and solve it," because there were children in the barber shop. Well, when one attempted to go outside, the other one shot him in the back of the head, and he fell right at the door. When I got to the scene, all that was there was a large amount of blood at the scene at the door of the barber shop with a whole bunch of children's footprints running from that followed from that barber shop all the way into the street and in every direction after that. That was a sign to me of how bad shootings are and how they affect the whole community, because the children are all over the place now. Who knows where those children are? And there was no way to make sure those children have some kind of trauma care or something like that.
What is it like when you get to the scene?
When I get to the scene, I have to, of course, first check out the scene, see what's happening, see where the body is, if a body is on scene, see who I have to talk to, if the police are going to give me an update. If there's family already on the scene, I try to go to the worst part of the scene there, where that person is crying and screaming, or where those people are in a tumultuous state, whatever the case may be. That's what I have to do, is go get to the scene, and if I have time to find out more about the scene, good, but if it's already happening, then I'm there to comfort, I'm there to serve, and so the serving and comforting start as soon as I get out the car.
Gotcha. How long have you been doing this?
I started around Memorial Day of 2016, after the shooting death of 9-year-old Tyshawn Lee, who was gunned down and assassinated, actually, in an alley on the south side of Chicago near the church that I was in.
Gotcha. What inspires you to do what you do?
God basically inspires me to do what I do, but I also know that it's something that needs to be done, something that not many people, if anybody, is doing, and definitely not the way God has given me to do it. And so the inspiration comes from the mothers. The inspiration comes from...
What was the worst day that you saw here in the city of Chicago doing what you do?
Well, the worst day was when the youngest victim we've had, a 5-month-old, was shot and killed. I spent 3 hours at the hospital in a room with the deceased child, with their mother and father, as the mother and father went through the grieving process and as the child lay there.
How do you find out about the crime scenes?
Well, there's a million different ways. There's several different ways that I find out about the crime scene. Of course, there's the internet scanner traffic community on Twitter. I also get calls from police. I get calls from city councilmen. I get calls from the community. I get calls, unfortunately, from other families that I've worked with previously who call me and say now their cousin has been shot. There's a lot of different ways that I find out. A lot of them call me there day one because I'm there from the crime scene, and they can call me 4 years later and say they need a jug of milk, and I'm going to make sure that they get it. I've taken young victims to the eye doctor because their grandmother couldn't do it. Whatever the case may be, I'm there to love on them, to serve them, to help them, to direct them, and whatever they need from that point on, making the worst day of their lives a little more tolerable for the rest of their lives.
What does a typical week look like in the summer of Chicago for you?
Well, I won't say that there's anything close to typical for me. However, usually the shootings and the homicides start early in the morning. Sometimes they don't end ever. They go all through the day and into the night, both on the south and west side, sometime on the north side, sometime in the surrounding suburbs, whatever the case may be. If there's children involved, then I'm from the streets to Comer Children's Hospital or Lurie's Hospital downtown in Northwestern, whatever the case may be. Sometimes all through the night I follow from one crime scene to the next to the next. I don't even go home in between. I don't get anything to eat in between because I'm going from one to the other. So in the summer, things of course are a lot different simply because there's mass gatherings. People want to get together. People want to have a party. They want to have a cookout or whatever the case may be. And that unfortunately is a breeding ground for violence.
All right. What do you think about the code of silence in our communities?
The code of silence in our communities is one of the main reasons why a lot of these perpetrators aren't caught. It's one of the reasons that the violence perpetuates, the violence continues. Anytime somebody can kill somebody and realize that they're not going to get caught, that everybody is scared of them. I'm taught that the Bible says that my people perish for the lack of knowledge. As long as we don't know who's doing what and we fear, God has not given us a spirit of fear, then we have that problem. And until somebody stands up and somebody speaks out, then we're going to continue to have that problem.
Gotcha. What about the trauma in our communities? Would you say most of our communities are suffering through PTSD?
I would say that everybody in every community is suffering from some form of PTSD. You can't drive down the Dan Ryan and not know about the shootings there and therefore have a problem with it. When you come outside, you look to the left and the right. You can look at how people watch each other or how they look at each other. Now in Chicago, one thing I've noticed is people don't say goodbye, see you later. They say stay safe. And so that's a certain level of PTSD right there. The knowledge of what's going on in the city in and of itself brings a certain level of PTSD, which we all have succumbed to.
City on fire. Ooh, down to the wire. It's my life in the shy. Ooh, it's my life in the shy.